going to start at the link. That's in Philadelphia, Breach. So the Eagles and Jalen Hurts are coming off that 3-interception loss to the Jets. And even though they were 5-1, we talked about this last week, we were wondering when that offense was going to look like it did last season. Meanwhile, the Dolphins had used the first month and a half of the season to outrun hapless defenses to all manner of scoring records, except the one team on their schedule with a winning record. They went to Buffalo and got their doors blown off. Cover your ears, Harry. So here we go. They go to Philadelphia. And look, there were injuries on both sides. There were a ton of penalties by the Dolphins. I thought the Dolphins hung in there. I thought they were going to win this game. It clearly didn't turn out that way. The last 10 to 12 minutes were all Philadelphia. So, Brinson, I'll come to you first. Can we trust this Dolphins team as they're currently constituted with the understanding that Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey are coming back?
And Devin Achane should return as well. You would think maybe a little with Teron Armstead supposed to come back too, I think. So a lot of key guys missing for a team that has been very good this season, now 5-2 on the year. I mean, I think to answer your question specifically, Wilson, yes, we can trust the Dolphins, but I do wonder if they beat the Chargers, the Patriots, the Broncos, which you beat the Chargers by 2. It's like, congrats on having air to breathe. You're alive, right? Like, you beat the Chargers by 1 score. Good job. The Pats, despite today, we'll get to that in a minute, that's not like an incredible win to beat the Pats by 7, even on the road, even on Sunday Night Football. The Broncos, they punked 70 on them, so we'll give them credit for that. And then the Giants and the Panthers, like, they're two. Harry and I were talking about this before we were doing some recording stuff for other pod features, and like, he's like, will the Dolphins show up in this game? Like, this big game. The last time they had a huge one like this was a couple weeks ago against the Bills. And they did show up in the sense of, like, it felt like the offense was operating like, nicely at times. The running game couldn't get going. And you sort of wonder, like, if that running game isn't going to work, like, as Chris Collinsworth kept pointing out, they had to resort to gadget plays in terms of to get the run game going, like little, like, sort of like pseudo jet sweep type stuff where Mostert's coming around on a Tyreek Hill fake. And so, like, that's concerning. And then, you need a defensive touchdown on a kind of fluky pick 6 to tie it up at 17 all. And then the Eagles pull away and score too late. It felt like the Dolphins could have won the game, but the Eagles, and this is where I think the biggest concern is, Breach. The Eagles looked like a much more physical team. And it felt like the Bills kind of did the same thing to the Dolphins. As much as we praise the Dolphins' speed and their, flashy nature and ability to break off big plays, it's a big, big concern if you're going to get out physicaled by better teams, conference, non-conference, whatever it is, especially if we're eyeing, January, February, etc.
Yeah, I mean, Brenton, finesse is fun until you get punched in the mouth and then can't really recover. I mean, that's like me being in the boxing ring with someone twice my weight, where I dodge a couple of his punches, then he hits me once in the face and I'm knocked out, match is over, it's done. I will say right now, I don't trust the Dolphins against good teams. I talked about it a little bit on the podcast, the Power Ranking podcast last Tuesday, just that you look at the teams they've beaten. Every team they've beaten has a losing record. We have now seen them play 2 teams with a winning record, and they have lost those 2 games by an average of 21 points per game. That's 3 touchdowns. And so, yes, they were missing people tonight, and yes, they did have some bad calls go against them. But the flip side of that is, you looked at the Eagles' domination. The Dolphins only scored 17 points. Jalen Hurts personally gave them 10 of those. He lost the fumble that led to a field goal where the Dolphins didn't get a first down. They just went 3 and out and kicked a field goal. And then obviously the pick 6 on a pass that he probably shouldn't have thrown. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it really feels like Miami's offense produced 7 points here. And so the Eagles defense is good. That's for sure. But I think part of this also was that the Dolphins got bullied on the Dolphins defense did. I mean, obviously the brotherly shove works on everyone, but when you're putting together a 6.5-minute drive in the 4th quarter because your defense can't do anything, that's a concern. So I think right now, the Dolphins have enough. They're going to beat the bad teams. They're going to beat the Raiders. They're going to beat the Commanders. They're going to beat the Titans. Like, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I am not worried at all about this team getting the playoffs. They're going to get to the playoffs. The question is, what's going to happen in the playoffs when they're playing teams like the Bills and like the Eagles, and they are playing good teams? Wilson, that is my question.
I think this actually...
One drive over 50 yards. That is a big concern with that Dolphins offense.
Yeah, to follow up on that. So a couple things, and you guys are both right. You're not wrong. And Harry, this is a little glimpse into passive-aggressive breach. When his team isn't playing or not doing well, he loves to take shots at other teams that are doing well. Typically, it used to be me and the Steelers, but since you're the high on the horse right now, watch out.
And the Steelers are 4-2, and Breach can't figure out why or how.
Yeah, I can't either. But here's the thing. So one offensive touchdown by the Dolphins. Brenton, you sort of touched on it. No Teron Armstead, the left tackle. Connor McGovern, no center. Isaiah Wynn went out in the first quarter. Lester Cotton came in and immediately got a hold that brought back a big play. And I think that affected the running game more than anything else. Shout out for Chase Claypool. He got on the field, so I'm surprised that didn't save the game for him. But I'm not making excuses with the injuries because every team has injuries and they can point to them, but they have some pretty big ones. So if they get Teron Armstead back, they get Connor McGovern back in the middle of that defense, and Jalen Carter made himself very familiar with the folks in the middle of that offensive line. They get Xavier and Howard back. They get Jalen Ramsey on the field for the first time. I think that looks different in the division. Now, to your point, Breach, it may not change anything when we get to the end of the road. But I think the positive for me is that we're not talking about Tua being the issue. Because a lot of times in recent years, it's like, well, Tua can't stay healthy. Tua won't get rid of the ball. Tua is doing everything to move that ball, move the team up and down the field. Jalen Waddle went out with a back injury for, I don't know, a third of the game, and he wasn't quite himself when he came back. Again, I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying when they're at full power, they're hard to stop. But I had the same thoughts you guys did when I was watching. Like, this team, they're not as tough as the Eagles are, and we were taking a lot of shots at the Eagles last week for the way they played that game. I give them credit, and this isn't a conversation about only the Dolphins in the sense that we're not giving credit to the Eagles, but the focus of what we're talking about here is what can we take away from this in terms of what it means for the Dolphins' future. I feel pretty good about the Eagles.
FYI, Mike Garofalo of NFL Media just tweeted out a video of Jalen Hurts hobbled. He's like, Jalen Hurts clearly battled something tonight, was hobbled as he was running off the field. I don't want to read too much into it, but Hurts played really well. 23 or 31, 279, 2 touchdowns. The interception was off just a fluke pick 6 there. AJ Brown with a monster game. Dallas Goedert, also a big game. But man, week 7, Jalen Hurts hobbled isn't great considering the number of times that they run this brotherly shove and the push tush. I think that's at least. I think the Eagles, but to breach it, the Dolphins are fine. They're going to get in the playoffs. Eagles are fine. They're 6-1. They've stacked a bunch of wins on the easier part of their schedule. It's going to get harder as we move forward. Jalen Hurts a little banged up, but this is a deep roster, a very talented roster, and they've won these close games in ways that we sort of didn't think that they would. So yeah, I mean, Philly is in great shape. I think Philly and San Francisco through 7 weeks. And San Francisco plays tomorrow night, of course, but or Monday night. They sort of are who we thought they were. There's no reason to be concerned about them.
The Eagles?
Yeah. You okay with
Philly and San Francisco?
Well, San Francisco, we can talk about that later. I mean, I don't know if I feel great about the way they
I just meant the top 2 teams. Like, it was like you were looking at the NFC and you're like, all right, like even if the Eagles regress a little bit, they're still gonna cakewalk to the playoffs because they have a really deep roster. We believe in what they've got. And that's sort of borne itself out. And we see the passing offense kind of come alive tonight. And you realize that the Eagles can, and this is what we learned last year, is they can win in different ways. The running game was fine tonight, but not great. The brotherly shove is unstoppable, and they can win in the pass game if they have to.
All right,
yeah, except just real quick, Jalen Hurts, if that's anything.
If that's the thing. That's the thing. Because Gardner Minshew ain't there either, yeah.
You got Marcus Mariota there as the backup.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts hurt would be bad.
And Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Don't forget him. Breach.